the numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host Bob Zarrell. With me in Deadbug Studios is
Coach Nez.
Visit us at zpnetwork.com, zoicsonline.com, Facebook at the Nothing Shocking podcast community fan page, and the Quad Cities Rock and Roll Junkies interest group. We're on Twitter at NoShockPod. Follow us there, like us, all those things you do on social media. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. Subscribe to the show, rate and review the show, or read any reviews on the air. Tell your friends about the show. Help us grow the show. Our guest this week is Brian Forsythe of the band Kix.
Yep.
My second time interviewing him, which I forgot about all till the middle of the interview, and I was like sending Eric my original interview with him.
You're such a veteran doing this, you don't remember who you've interviewed and who you haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I all of a sudden like have with him like I know this guy, I know we've talked, and it was a really fun interview. He's just I don't know, they all have their interesting roads that they've traveled, and he's no exception.
He was a phenomenal interview, very personal.
Before we get to that interview, I want to tell you who our sponsors are.
Yeah, Ragged Records, Davenport, Iowa, Rock Island, Illinois. But right now, the Davenport location is rehabbing from the Mississippi River flood. And we have Legends Picks Guitar Picks out of Milan, Illinois, and Rockstar Picks.Rocks out of Queens, New York.
And as always, I want to thank the band Hong Kong Sleepover for letting us use their music. You can pick up all their music on Apple Music, Google Play, Spotify, Pandora, all those places. Amazon. What's going on? Anything?
I don't.
We didn't prepare for this at all.
Well, no, there's really nothing that's been popped up that's been overly exciting.
No, I mean, Ghost is coming to town October 8th. We've talked about that a couple times. I've been on, for whatever reason, never really listened to it before, but I bought all the Merciful Fate and King Diamond stuff and just started listening to it.
On vinyl?
No, I bought it from Apple.
Oh, okay,
iTunes.
yeah.
I'm going to gradually grab stuff on vinyl as I can. It's probably too hard to find all of it on vinyl right away and really expensive, I'd imagine.
Oh, I'm sure.
I love it. I was shocked at how much. I mean, I knew the Metallica covers and I knew that Ghost got compared to them, but I'm kind of a big fan of what I've heard so far.
I'm going to tell you that Merciful Fate Melissa album is my favorite album from Merciful Fate and King Diamond on his own. It just heads and tails the best album he's ever been a part of, I think.
That's a fantastic album, though. I mean, I don't think that's going out on a limb. I think I agree. That one sticks out the most. That one's one I know the songs because of Metallica's versions.
Sure.
But still, I think they're better here. I just never really listened to him before. I mean, I knew who he was, but never took the time. I was like 4 when they all came out, so it was fun to go back and just was mowing the yard and just kind of listen to one album at a time. And I was just like, holy cow. And it was a lot of fun.
Isn't music awesome? Because, let's face it, there's so much music out there. You're never going to listen to it all.
No.
But you can find something old that you've never heard before, and it's just so new. It's like brand new to your ears.
Well, Tommy, my other podcast, because the Elton John movie came out, which I guess we could talk about that too. Tommy turned 50, the record did recently.
Yeah.
And we decided to make our classic that we were going to talk about Tommy because Elton John was in it. And I've heard it, and I never really liked Tommy as much as other proggy records, concept albums, until I was hearing it for the first time this week, and I was just like, I kind of like Tommy. I mean, you kind of need to listen to it as an album. Some of those songs work on their own. But as a whole, it's long, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I loved the movie. I don't know if you've ever seen Tommy the movie or not.
Oh yeah.
It was just, I was shocked at how, I shouldn't say Tommy, obviously critically acclaimed. Everybody loves that record. But it was kind of fun to revisit that for the first time. And maybe, probably since maybe I was 20, 21 when I was pretending to be in The Who, or into The Who when I was more of a greatest hits fan.
But the thing is that there's just so, outside of all that stuff, there's just so many things that throughout our lifetime, we're going to find something that we've never heard before. I'm like, wow, that was really good. How have I never heard that album or that artist before? That's what's so cool about music, and especially rock and roll. There's just so much stuff to make new to your eardrums.
Yeah, and I highly recommend Rocket Man. Better than Bohemian Rhapsody, better than The Dirt, better than Ray, it's the best rock biopic I've ever seen. And I think part of it's because it's not real. There's definitely a fantasy element to it. And so then you don't have to get everything right. The songs are out of order, but they tell the story of his life really well. So if you get a chance to go see Rocket Man, it works on the surface level, and then all the metaphors work really well too. So even if you miss the metaphors, the surface level is great. But if you catch all the other stuff, it's like it's if it had come out in a different era where movies could still be classics, I think this would be like Field of Dreams type. There's like,
oh, cool.
There's that moment, where at the end of Field of Dreams, you're like, let's have a catch, Dad. There's that in this, but I think it'll get missed in 2019. But everybody should go see Rocket Man right now. It's that good.
It's funny that you say that, because I think the next biopic should be of The Who. Just Keith Moon's shenanigans itself is a movie in its own. I really think that band should have a biopic after themselves. I don't know
if they do it, I think they should go more the Rocket Man route than the Queen route. That's my personal opinion. The reason I like The Dirt, I like Bohemian Rhapsody, but they're not accurate. They like we've mentioned, they totally skip Girls, The Dirt did.
Right.
Freddie Mercury didn't have AIDS till after Live Aid, or he didn't know he had them till after Live. There's just so many things that they have to condense into a 2-hour movie. You have to condense 30 years and maybe longer into a 2-hour movie, and it never works. Straight Outta Compton, same thing. People love these movies, but as a diehard fan, for me, it's hard to accept that, and I kind of make it a 7-hour movie. I'm okay with that.
Do you think that it would be more beneficial for these biopics to be done like in a Netflix series way, like make it 2 seasons to get it really correct?
No, I think you do the documentaries, the behind the music type stuff, and then you do something like Rocket Man, where this was definitely Elton John's side of the story, and the way he did it was, he made his parents like caricatures. They're not real people. They're his version, and you can tell it's his version. No one's going to come out of this movie and think Elton John's dad was a dick. They're going to think Elton John thought his dad was,
Right.
And that's neater, the way they did that there. The other ones, it's just, I would rather have a documentary, the behind the music type thing, the real stuff, that story. You can do that over a series or super long doc. It doesn't really matter to me. But if you're going to make a movie, one, I wish they would stop, personally. Although Rocket Man's the best, so if they keep going in the right direction. But otherwise, I would rather they kind of take liberties with it and go out of your way to not be accurate. This wasn't about, again, Elton John, one of his more recent songs was the beginning of it. And so it wasn't about the creation of the music. It was the story of his life with his songs. It was kind of a neat thing. So, but to your point, The Who would be a neat band because of, just Keith Moon and even Peter Townsend. Him. In my opinion, he's one of the greatest rock stars of all time. And no one played like him. He's underrated, but at the same time, perfectly rated. He's not really mentioned in the categories like Clapton and Hendrix.
No, he's not.
But he could be. He's almost more interesting today than Hendrix and all that, because nobody copied him like they did everybody, Hendrix and Clapton. So
just the egos in that band too. Roger Daltrey and Peter Townsend. Pete Townsend, the clashes of personalities within that band, the Keith Moon shenanigans, and
then John Entwistle being one of the best bassists of all time.
Yeah, and he was more in the background of the band. I mean, it was basically a band of they were all lead in what they did. You know what I mean? They're musicians that all were lead. I mean, John Entwistle, a lead bass player. Keith Moon, a lead drummer. Pete Townsend.
Pete Townsend, a rhythm guitarist who led the band.
Right.
Was the actual leader. So yeah, it's weird how you have these lead instruments, and then kind of the guy who is the leader is almost in the back. And it's almost like Keith Moon played drums like the guitar riff, and Pete Townsend played guitar like it was the drum beat. Like it's almost like he was keeping time and Keith Moon was the lead. I mean, that's not how it was, but they were such a unique and different band that and I'll
be honest with you, I'm not a Who fan. I mean, generically,
right.
But I'm not one that's going to get into their deep cuts or anything like that. I'm just not. Although I love John Entwistle's work outside the Who as well.
I went and saw him one time, and it was shortly after Entwistle died, like the tour they did right after that. Or maybe they're in the middle of the tour. I don't remember. And they did like a 30-minute medley of Tommy as the encore. And I was so bored because all I knew was Pinball Wizard, and that was cool. But everything else is just this weird Tommy stuff. And then today it's just, now that I've rediscovered it, it was just, I love the whole thing. Like, the whole story. I like dove deep into the whole mythology of it, and it was a lot of fun. And I've always liked the Who, but I've been more of a Greatest Hits fan, like I said. But it's been a fun week for music, and I didn't even realize we were going to talk this long for our intro. But
we've gone from
we had nothing planned to one of our longer intros. But we also have a great interview. Brian Forsythe of Kix. I can't talk. I have a lisp. That wasn't a slip. That was just.
We all know what you're talking about.
Yeah, great band from the '80s. Underappreciated, in my opinion. But yeah,
it's good. It's a good chat, is it not?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too.
All right, enjoy it right now.
Good night.
Hello.
Hey, Brian, this is Eric Nesbitt with the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Hey.
Hey, sorry we missed your call. Bob was bringing his dog inside from outside. We got some severe weather coming, so I want to introduce you to my co-host, Bob Zerl.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Hey, well, thank you for the correspondence, and thank you for agreeing to do this with us. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, this should be fun.
Yeah, excellent. So I was in correspondence with your PR person, and I guess we wanted to touch upon the 30th year anniversary of Blow My Fuse with your Fuse 30 Reblown. I guess you guys released it back in September. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit more detail about it? I guess we're kind of seeing more of this stuff kind of pop up from artists celebrating anniversaries of albums from the past and bringing them back and remastering them and making them new again. So can you kind of give us a little detail about the whole project?
Well, yeah. Well, for one thing, it was the anniversary, and really, Mark Schenker, our bass player, is kind of responsible. He kind of came up with the idea between him and Madeline at Loud and Proud Records. They started talking about it, and like we had no idea if we could even get a hold of the masters or any of that. And so Mark started looking into it, and it turned out that it was a lot easier than we thought it was going to be to get a hold of the original masters. So once we had those, we asked Bo Hill if he would be interested in mixing them, and he jumped at the chance. So he did a total remix, and the way he did it, he didn't even listen to the original. He just took the masters, and he ran all the different tracks and listened to what was there, and he did his own mix, his own take on the whole thing. So it came out a little bit different than the original, which is kind of cool, because he brought out things that were that weren't in the mix that were on the tracks, that were kind of hidden on the tracks. But so that was that's the overall cool thing. And then then we printed out all the masters had all the track. What are those called? The sheets, the track sheets that show you what's on the track. So we took photos of all that stuff and try to put together a really cool package.
I guess when we're talking about packaging and taking on something, would you consider a project like this trying to dig something from the past, like Blow My Fuse? How much of a daunting task was it for you guys to come together and work on this thing to make it, I guess, new again?
It wasn't really that. Well, I don't know. I can't say because I wasn't involved in the day-to-day stuff, but we each contributed a little something to it, and my thing was the little caricatures of the band. I drew little caricatures, and but Mark did most of it. He did most of the correspondence back and forth with Bo Hill, and when the mixes got close, he started sending them out to us, and we'd give our comments. But really, I think a lot of this stuff we figure, we put it out there because it's been 30 years, and try to make it fresh again. And what we did was, once the thing was released, we did a whole year of playing that record. We did the album in its entirety for all our shows, which was kind of cool because there was a couple songs on there. Well, one song we never played before, and a couple of them that we rarely played. So it was kind of interesting.
You talk about 30 years. When I found out that it was released for the 30th anniversary, I remember when Blow My Fuse came out, I was 17 years old. All of a sudden now I'm 47 years old, and I'm like, how in the world is this possible? Where did 30 years go? How did it come by so fast, or how did it go by so fast?
That is a good question. I mean, the older you get, of course, the faster time goes because, I mean, I so, by the time you get my age, it's really flying by. But like now it's like 10 years will go by and it seems like, 2 years.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and you had a bonus disc of like the demos. Was that difficult to put together?
Right. Yeah. I almost forgot to mention that. Yeah, because back in the old days, Mark Shanker was a friend of the band. Like we knew him back then. He played in another band that used to open for us, and he was good friends with Ronnie. And I guess Ronnie had given him all the demos as we were going along. So Mark actually had possession of all these old cassettes of the demos for the record. And so we thought it would be interesting to sort of throw those in there so you could hear, like the demo, they're all the stuff that we recorded at our own studio before even going into pre-production to do the record. So you can sort of hear what the original ideas were, and some of them are almost exactly like the record, and others, the arrangements are kind of weird, and there's extra parts in there, or parts are backwards, or so it was kind of, we thought we'd give a look at that process.
I guess, kind of change gears a little bit is that Blow My Fuse sold a ridiculous amount of albums back in its day. It's considered, I would think of it as being a legendary album for its time in the late 80s. Do you have any idea offhand how many millions of copies of Blow My Fuse were sold in a ballpark figure?
Well, it went platinum, so that meant over 1 million. But you know what? We never got the record companies are weird like that. They won't tell you exactly what's going on. And in fact, I know that record probably sold that many way back a lot further. Like it didn't go platinum until 10 years after the fact. And I think the reason why was because going into it, we changed managements right before that record. We went with Mark Puma, who's also managing Twisted Sister at the time, and he went into the record company and renegotiated our deal because we had this really horrible deal that was made back in 1981, and it was based on vinyl, and it didn't include, there were no videos included in the budget, and like all this weird stuff, because it was back when MTV was just starting, so nobody really planned on videos, or we didn't have CDs in there. Like, there's just a lot of weird stuff in the contract that wasn't covered. So he went back in and renegotiated, and plus our rate was really like one of the worst. I forget what we got, like a half a penny or something for each record or something horrible. But so he went back and he did this decent renegotiation, and in doing so, he put in these had these bonus clauses put in, like when the record reached a certain amount, we'd get a bonus. And of course, the record stalled out at 850,000 because the bonus was at $1 million, and it stayed there until 10 years later when the contract went back to the old contract, like the new renegotiation timed out. That's when it went platinum. So it's just kind of fishy.
How convenient.
So are you able to like go and get? I mean, I don't want to rehash bad memories, but like, don't you have to like do audits and stuff to get them to even look into that kind of thing, or how does that all work?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't even know.
Sorry,
I am the worst one to ask about business stuff, and I never, back when we first got signed, we all sat there and we all signed the contracts. I just signed my name. I didn't even, I kind of flipped through it and acted like I was looking at it, but
right.
I never paid attention.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you talk the artists today, they complain about not being able to make money because there's really no physical copies anymore. It's all streaming and whatnot. But it's kind of always been, unless you had a good deal, I mean, the record companies are the ones making the money. They're the ones that are really, really struggling right now. I mean, everybody is.
Even back, even when, like, our first few records didn't sell a whole lot, but the record companies still made their money back. I mean, if you looked at it,
right.
But they would always complain that they were losing money, but they never dropped us, so that was proof that we must have been making them some money.
And when Blow My Fuse was released in '88, you kind of started seeing a time in hard rock, heavy metal, rock and roll that the sound was kind of changing from that the LA Strip, Sunset Strip sound. Kix had a totally different sound than what a lot of bands were putting out back then. When you guys were in the studio creating Blow My Fuse, was it a concerted effort to try to kind of maybe move away from that Sunset Boulevard sound that was so prevalent back then?
No, it wasn't really conscious at all. We just did it like we did it. I mean, we didn't sound like that. So, and like, Ronnie and I as guitar players, we came up through the 60s and 70s, pre Van Halen. So our guitar styles were more, like Aerosmith and the Stones and, all that kind of thing, more than Eddie Van Halen. Like the Sunset Strip sound was all based on that kind of thing, the hotshot guitar players and all that stuff. And we definitely didn't look at ourselves like that. And we modeled ourselves more after, like, say, Cheap Trick and Aerosmith, really.
Yeah, that's...
And AC/DC. I can't forget about AC/DC, sorry. Almost did.
Did you ever feel pressure from the record labels to try to sound different, or were they pretty much... I mean, at that point, I think Aerosmith was coming back. Guns N' Roses kind of had a similar... They had more of that vibe than the Van Halen side. I mean, was the record company ever trying to make you sound like anybody else, or did you kind of feel free the entire time?
No. Well, early on, Cool Kids, that was the one record where they kind of tried to push us towards a more like a poppy sound. And that was the result, of the record company's pressure, that record. And that's always been our least favorite, even though, there's a few good songs on it, but there's also 3 covers, and, it doesn't have that edge like the rest of the records have, consistent through the thing. So I think after Cool Kids, we kind of, we refused to give in. And there was a little bit of pressure on Midnight Dynamite, because that was kind of mid 80s, and Beau Hill was doing a lot of those like Rat and Warrant and those bands. So there was a little bit of that going on during that record, just through Beau Hill. He brought in that guy Mike Sleemer to play some stuff on there, which always bugs me. But other than that, we pretty much did our own thing.
I kind of wanted to change gears on you just a little bit, because you when Kix was at the height of their popularity in the 80s, you guys were a part of that, those massive touring across North America and into Europe. And, playing live now has changed so much. We had many artists that have come on to, give their take on, touring, as far as a lot of them choose to do the weekend thing, or they only play festivals, or it just seems like few and few artists now are getting on a bus and traveling from coast to coast. I guess in this portion of your career, and where are you at on the touring aspects of rock and roll?
Well, we do the fly dates. So, the thing is, touring in a bus is really expensive, and it's hard. Like the way the state of the way that the like live music, it's pretty much limited to the weekends unless it's a festival. So it doesn't really make sense to drive around the country, because you're only going to be playing a couple, maybe 2-3 times a week at the most, and the rest of the time you're going to be sitting at a hotel somewhere just spending money. So when we got back together at the end of 2000, well, actually, when we first got together, we didn't even think about the touring thing yet. But once we got up and running and hooked up with an agent and decided to start doing this, I remember I was looking into it at first, and I was noticing bands like Great White and a lot of the 80s bands were doing that. They would do the fly dates, and they were making really decent money. So we just decided we were going to put like a money limit on it. Like we wouldn't accept anything below a certain amount, just so it would cover all the expenses, and it would allow us to do this. So that's what we do now. We just fly out for a weekend, and a lot of our dates are still on the East Coast, where those guys. Well, now I'm over here, but up in Maryland, all those guys still live up around the same area. So we do a lot of shows within driving distance of there. So we'll just, drive out to the show and then drive home. But, other places in the country, we just, we'll fly out the night before, we'll play the gig, and then fly back. It's really a lot easier.
At this point in your career, is it kind of more like when you're right in the middle of it and you're searching for that popularity and you're just kind of constantly trying to get bigger and bigger, is it a lot easier now to just, maybe easy is not the right word, but is it more refreshing to just not have to chase popularity? You can just kind of satisfy your creative side more so than having to worry about the business side of things, or is that still there?
No, I mean, I guess no. As far as especially as far as playing live, we have a built-in audience that's been following us for years, and so we don't really worry about that part of it. I guess the only concerns these days are like when we put out that Rock Your Face Off record. The first record after 19 years or so. That was a little bit of pressure. Like putting out new music is still a little bit of a pressure, and it's not like I I don't know how to describe it. It's more like, you don't want to step backwards and put something out that's bad. So you got to keep. It's a lot of pressure to keep something, to put out something new that still sounds like yourself.
Yeah,
I mean that's the challenge.
I guess that kind of flows into the next question I had. Kix has always had a loyal cult following. Even to this day, many bands from the '80s can't even come close to the following that you guys have. What is the secret? How does Kix stay relevant and still have this movement of fans that are still relevant today as they were 30 years ago?
That's a good question, but I think, well, back in the old days, we did tour relentlessly, and but we never broke through like some of these other bands. We never achieved like that. We did a lot of like opening tours, but we never headlined like an arena tour. We never got to that level, but we still. We would play those tours, but we'd still do the club dates in between. So we hit a lot of ground. I mean, we covered a lot of ground, and we had a reputation, which we still do, for our live show. And when we came back around, all the fans that had seen us and were already there were older and could afford to come out and see us. And then there were a lot of fans that had heard about us that never got to see us. And just, I guess, because of our reputation, like especially now when we do these the cruises and stuff, you get people from all over the world coming to getting on those cruises. And every single time we do one of those, I run into several people that it's like, oh, this is the first time I ever saw you guys. And it's like, really? But they'd heard about us, but they never got to see us. And now that, I guess the way things are now, people they're more able to come and see us. And they're older, they have the money to travel and do these cruises, and it works out. And they bring their kids, which is really cool.
I've never done one of those cruise things. How does that? I've always kind of looked at them, and it's hard to pick the one I want to go on. Are you just kind of out there with the fans at all times, or how does that all work?
Yeah.
Or do they have to pay for like a meet and greet session,
Well, they do have meet and greets, like where they just file them in like a cattle call. Like they'll be set a bunch of bands around the edge of the room, and they'll just have this line of people that just keep coming through and lining up with the band, and they take the photo, and then they go on to the next band. And but that's like kind of like an extra thing. But besides that, yeah, you're just sort of wandering around. I guess the meet and greets are so the fan can meet the whole band at once, as a band. But at other times, you'll see one guy from some band in the buffet or something, but they do get to mingle like that. I'll hang out with people. I'll even I'll be walking around at the buffet, and I'll see some people that wave at me, and I'll go sit at their table and sit there and talk to them and eat my food.
I mean, that's kind of
so
neat.
It's kind of cool like that. It's a little bit more personal. And when we first started doing those cruises, I was really worried about it. I was like thinking, how's this going to work? But I think now that we've done so many of them, and a lot of these fans have done so many of them, they're a lot calmer. Like when they see you out, they don't just go crazy. They just come up and talk to you, and it's a lot more casual.
That's really cool. Do they have? I heard kind of a horror story from a band who played the Kiss cruise, and they ended up getting put on a stage opposite Kiss.
Oh, really?
Is there a lot of multiple stages going on in these cruises, or are there just a few stages? How does that all work?
Well, there's a couple of the bigger stages, like the last. They changed the ship a few times. The last two cruises were they used the same ship, so they had a big theater stage. They have a big stage up on the pool deck, and then they have there's like a hockey rink, like an arena thing in the middle of the ship too.
Jeez.
So there's 3 bigger stages, and then besides that, there's a bunch of like lounges and club-sized venues. So they try to schedule it so you can sort of go see one band you like and then run to another.
Right.
But a lot of them do overlap. So you sort of, but each band plays twice. So if you miss them once, you can always catch them again.
I kind of wanted to switch gears on you just a bit here. As far as technology in recording new material, we've had many artists come on, and they like the ability to have their own home studio. They can do it right off their laptop, etc. And we've had a lot of artists that also have come on that said, "Hey, I need to be in that studio setting away from my house where I can focus in." I guess where are you at and the band at when it comes to creating new material? Do you guys take advantage of that home studio right from your laptop, or how does it all go?
Well, maybe as far as putting ideas down, we all do it at our own pace, at our own homes. But when it comes to doing the actual record, I mean, we've only done one record so far, studio record, and we did that. Mark Shanker has a home studio in his house, like a really nice setup. And so we did most of it there, like all the guitars and vocals, and then we did the drums and some of the overdubs in an actual studio. But it's a lot easier these days because of that. I mean, you can do it anywhere. I mean, I've played on other people's records where they'll just send me a file, and I'll just put it, bring it up on my laptop and add a guitar solo to it and send it back. Okay. So, in that aspect, it's really easy. But on the other hand, I'm like so technically challenged. It's like when I'm trying to mess with my own stuff, it's like sometimes I'll get so caught up in trying to figure out how to get it to work that by the time I get it working, the whole inspiration for the idea is gone. I hate that.
Another thing that's kind of different between now and then is like when we were younger, there was that mystery behind all the bands we grew up with. Jimmy Page, did he worship the devil? Was Paul really dead? You don't know anything. You have to read magazines to even know, read interviews and stuff about the bands. Now everything's so accessible. You talk about the crews and being able to sit at the same table and eat with them. And if, even beyond that, you got social media where the artists, you get as much access as they want to give you, and the more they give you, the better off they end up doing. As a fan, what do you prefer? Did you kind of like the mystery of it, or do you like the accessibility?
I think both. There's good things about both. Because when I was coming up, younger, it was a mystery. You'd see like Cream magazine or Hit Parade or one of those, and you see pictures of Aerosmith, and it's like, oh man, look at these guys, and then they'd come to town, and it was like this thing to go see one of these bands that you've only seen photos in the magazine. Now it's like almost oversaturated. So, and I think maybe, that's why people don't go out and see bands anymore, because they just get on YouTube, or their friend will go see it and they'll just sit at home and watch the live feed from Facebook,
Right.
That's kind of funny that you say that too, because I was just at our local grocery store yesterday. They used to have a huge aisle of magazines, all the way from, rock and roll magazines all the way down to the end for sports and fishing and hunting and political magazines. And now their magazine rack has shrank down to maybe 6 foot by 6 foot. And there's only maybe, 20 magazine subscriptions in the whole thing. As far as you as the fan goes, do you miss that paper, tangible read? Open the magazine up and reading the Hit Parade or the Circus magazine. Is that still something that resonates in you? Like, I wish we still had that.
It was cool, but I mean, I'm personally, I'm just as satisfied looking at it online, you know. I mean, it's just as convenient. But there is something cool about flipping through pages. You know, I still get a few magazines in the mail. I get, you know, guitar magazines and stuff.
Right. Mm-hmm. What about like records and albums? Are you a vinyl guy, or are you more keep it in? Are you like the streaming and the downloads?
No, I do like a physical thing. I mean, I have done a few downloads here and there if I just want like a song or something. But you know, I've done both. I'll hear something and I'll think, man, that sounds really good, and I'll order the CD. I'd rather have like the physical thing, and I still have a bunch of vinyl too.
Oh, very cool. I have one more question for you before we let you go. Bob, do you have any more questions?
I have one more.
Yeah, Bob, go ahead.
All right, I'll go first.
That's always.
I mean, I'm just kind of looking at, you know, your history, and I mean, when I grew up, I was 8 and 9 when Blow My Fuse came out, and you know, I was a big fan of you and a lot of the bands from that era. And then my parents like found God and they cut off MTV, so I missed the whole grunge thing because that would have been kind of right in my wheelhouse for my age. So I'm, you know, still going to high school in my white Lion shirt and whatnot. But you know, when you guys were touring and making albums at that point, did you see it coming, the grunge movement, or was it just something that you got off the road and all of a sudden it was like, whoa, everything's changed?
Well, you know, it's like everything else. It's like, you know, it's like the real estate market or any of that stuff. You know, it's kind of like this big bubble, and it was like at the end of the 80s, it was really getting saturated with these a lot of bands that sounded the same and looked the same, and but I guess I can only speak for myself, but I still had the hope that we were going to break through. Like after Blow My Fuse, you know, it felt like we were just under the surface, and then we did Hotwire, which I felt like I thought that was even a better record. But right when now this is. It's just Kix timing. Like as soon as right before that record was released, we went up and had a meeting with the record company, and at that point, we had gotten off the main Atlantic label, and they switched us over to East West, which was a subsidiary of Atlantic, but it was a smaller, you know, little label, and we thought, okay, now we got this record that's even better, and we're on a smaller label where they can like pay more attention to us and give us special treatment, and we just thought everything was going to go great. And we have this meeting right before the record gets released, and we're sitting there, and the president of that label, who his name escapes me right now, I can't think of what his name was, but we all sit down, we're sitting in his office, and he goes, "Oh, I got to show you something," and he opens his drawer and pulls out the Nirvana CD. And he goes, "This is the next big thing," almost like telling us, "Oh, you know, what you guys just did is meaningless." And you know what the weird part about that whole scene, we went through a similar thing back in the Cool Kids days.
Right.
When we were doing Cool Kids, we were during the final mixes, our A&R guy shows up at the studio, and he had the final mixes of Pyromania. And he sticks that in, and we're thinking, we're hearing this huge rock record, and we just did this little pop record. And we're like, oh, man. And that was the same thing with not that Nirvana, not that we were going to ever be a grunge band, because that was like further from, you know. Yeah.
But there was no reason.
but it just was that same thing. Like it just took all the wind out of the sails.
Right.
You know?
That could have. But there's no reason those things couldn't have coexisted. I mean, if you listen to classic rock radio now, you know, it's Nirvana, then it's Poison, then it's Metallica, then it's Aerosmith. You know, all those bands are now together, back to back on the rock
That's
radio.
True.
And it just seemed like the grunge bands were so anti Bon Jovi or whoever it was that they almost, you know, Def Leppard wasn't out there bad mouthing Motley Crue. You know, they were they were
Right.
coexisting. So I don't know. That always bugged me. Maybe just because I was cut off from MTV and I was alone.
Well, it's another thing. It's like it wasn't hip to be into the '80s thing anymore. Like
Right.
everybody changed their clothes and everything.
Which is, I don't really understand that. Before I ask you my last question here, but I don't understand how, how all of a sudden it literally was cut off one day or one night.
Right.
You wake up the next day and people are now wanting to only listen to bands that wear flannel shirts and jeans and construction boots or whatever. It still blows my mind. So with that being said, I'm going to ask you my last question. All right. So you had touched upon that you also, besides in Kix, you play it. You go in the studio and do stuff for other bands or artists or whatever. Are you still involved with Rhino Bucket today? Are you still playing live for them? Are you still recording with them?
Well, we did last year. Wait, this is 2019.
Yeah.
Wow, time does fly. I guess it was 2017. I forget. We had recently put out a record. I thought it was last year. Maybe it was the year before. I don't know. But anyway, we put out a record, a really good record too, but it didn't really do a whole lot, in this day and age. So the band is sort of on hiatus right now.
Mm-hmm.
George, the singer, who's the main guy, he was so disillusioned this last time around that he just decided he wanted to take a break from it and not do it anymore. But since then, and I always left the door open. I said, well, if you ever change your mind, I'd love to do it. And since then, we've gotten a couple offers for like festivals and among other things. So that door is still open. I think we'll probably end up playing at some point again. But that was a fun little excursion doing the Rhino Bucket stuff. I really enjoyed that.
I guess to kind of follow up with that, you're in Kix, you're working with Rhino Bucket, you're doing other things. Is that just kind of like the way for artists now to stay? I guess they do it. Artists do it for all kinds of different reasons. Creativity, financial, which is none of our business. But is that still kind of how the way to keep yourself relevant in this industry, to maybe get involved with as many things as possible as you can?
I guess that could be part of it. For me personally, it's more about just sort of staying fresh as a musician and guitar player, because Rhino Bucket was similar, had an energy like Kix, the AC/DC thing, but it was different, and it was different enough to where I had to tweak my style for each band, and it just keeps me on my toes. And a lot of I've played on other people's recordings where they'll send me a song and it'll be like completely like something that I wouldn't have thought about playing on, and but it does, it keeps your creativity sort of fresh, and I noticed that, like, I just recently moved to Nashville, and I've been going out and seeing a few bands here and there, and that's like really the big thing around this town is everybody's playing in a bunch of different things at the same time. It's kind of cool.
Absolutely.
But I think it's because everybody, it keeps the the more you play, the better you get, really.
Absolutely. Well, before we let you go for the evening, is there anything else that you would like to plug or promote?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I don't know. I mean, we've got a bunch of shows, but I mean, I'm sure everybody's aware of that. We're not planning on giving up anytime soon. In fact, like I mentioned, I just moved to Nashville, and I just bought a house, so now I can't stop playing. I have to keep playing. So hopefully the fans will just keep coming, and it's so far it's been like that. I mean, we keep it's such a blessing, to have these fans, and when we first got back together and experienced, those first few shows, like, of course, all the people are going to come out of the woodwork to see us again after all those years. And we thought, well, it's just this excitement, of us just coming back. And we just kept waiting for it to fade or for, the other shoe to drop or whatever. And it never did. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, which is really cool. And I just hope that, we can keep up with it with our age, I mean, we're still, we still have the energy, but I can feel it like the older I get, I'll jump off one of those boxes on stage. Like Ronnie and I have those little ego boxes that we jump up on for the guitar solos, and I'll go flying off one of those, and the next morning I'll wake up and I really feel it now. It's like,
Oh, excellent. Well, this is how it works. You're behind a couple of episodes. We'll have this out probably, what do you think, maybe 3 weeks maybe?
Yeah, 2 to 3.
Yeah, and when it's all edited and everything, I will email you the link for it, and if you could, share it to any social media you have, we'd much appreciate it.
yeah, I'll definitely do that.
Oh, fantastic. So if you ever want to come back on again, please text me, email me, whatever. We'd be glad to have you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and like I said, I'll be in touch with you in about 3 weeks.
All right,
All right.
great.
Thanks, Brian. Have a great night.
All right, you too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I'll be broadcasting the underdeal. When the black is rough and the sky